Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast, where we study the Gita and we try to apply it to our lives. And we try to become a little bit more thoughtful about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how it aligns with where we're going in life. Okay? So we get together every Monday, Thursday, and we do this. And we are in chapter 4 today. We're going to start with text 20, chapter 4, text 20. And with that, we'll go ahead and start. Danny Kate's going to read for us today. Sharing the screen whenever you're ready.
420. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings.
So,
Going?
yeah, no, that's good.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
discuss this and then we'll go to the next.
Okay.
So here Krishna is continuing his discussion of how action can be karma free, and he'll elaborate this in the next several verses in this section. So this verse describes what we call a sadhaka, someone who's endeavoring for perfection. And then the following two verses after this, which we'll also get to today, they talk about a siddha. That's like someone who's like perfected this consciousness. So some of these standards are really high. We're going to talk about how we can kind of start to trend in that direction in our own lives. But the whole theme here is that we act, right? That the motive matters and it matters most. We really talked about that a lot in the last class. The motive matters and it matters most. And in this particular verse, Krishna's highlighting three things. Right? He says, no attachment to results. The person is constantly content, and the person doesn't take shelter of anything material. Right? So these three things are an elaboration of the previous verse of unselfish dutifulness, which we talked about a lot. So if a person's acting unselfishly, they'll be free from bondage. We talked about the example of like a police officer who's acting in the line of duty, not for his own selfish reasons. You know, he's acting for something bigger than him. And in that way, he's exempt from the consequences of his actions, right? So it's natural that when we do action that we'll expect some kind of result, right? That's a natural thing for us. So I want to talk a little bit about what exactly non-attachment is, what detachment is. And when we talk about detachment in the context of a relationship, I'm going to give that example for the flow for a little bit here because it's something that I feel like we can all kind of relate to. And when we think about a relationship, you know, in some aspects, anybody who's been married or is married, you know, a relationship, there's definitely times where it's a duty, right? Like you're not always your best self. You're not always waking up like, you know, wanting to serve that other person in your highest place, right? So it's really a duty. And when we're in a relationship and we're practicing this level of non-attachment, where I'll kind of describe what it's going to look like, right? A person loves their partner and invests in the relationship, right? They're kind, they're supportive, they're committed, and they do their duty in a very faithful and caring way, right? They don't try to control the other person. They don't depend on that person for their own happiness. And if the relationship thrives, they're grateful. If challenges arises, they work through them with maturity. And if the relationship ends, then they can accept it without a high level of resentment or devastation, right? Knowing that God is the ultimate shelter. And so their mindset is one of like, I love you and I will do my duty in this relationship, but my happiness is not dependent on you. Right? God is my true refuge. This is like the gold star standard here of like non-attachment in a relationship, right? We're not cold, we're not neglectful, right? So when we say detached, sometimes we kind of have those words in our mind. You know, we think of somebody who's just kind of like cold and doesn't care. That's not what this is, right? That's not non-attachment. We still care, right? We still love. right? But we understand in the context of the bigger picture. And in that way, it allows us to love more selflessly, right? So a non-attachment, it's not your responsibility. It's not like I don't care and I'm going to neglect my duties, right? We still have to try our best. We have to work with sincerity and devotion without being enslaved by the results, right? So it's a balance of doing like our best as an offering and knowing that we're not the ultimate controllers. So we work as if we are the ultimate controllers, knowing that we're not. And so in the context of a relationship, if a person is showing up in a way that's, irresponsible, they're going to be unreliable, dishonest. They're not going to want to commit. They'll maybe ignore their partner's emotional needs, not communicate, maybe not put effort into maintaining the relationship. Their mindset is going to be one of like, I don't owe them anything. They should just accept me as I am without expecting anything from me. Right? That's like that's irresponsible. Another common misconception of this word non-attachment is laziness, right? Lethargy. Like, okay, well, I don't care, so I'm not going to do anything, right? So where non-attachment is motivated by duty and devotion, this state is motivated by like ignorance or fear or carelessness, right? Real non-attachment makes us more active, not less, right? Because we're not attached to the results, and it kind of clears that way for us to commit ourselves fully and sincerely. So in a relationship, a person who's just shows up lazy, they may want a strong relationship, but they'll make little effort, right? They'll assume things will just work out without putting in time, energy, or emotional engagement. Right? If problems come up, they'll avoid addressing them and they'll let the relationship drift away. They'll say, I know we should talk about our issues, but it's too much effort, so I'm just going to deal with it later. Right? It's like the lazy way to show up for your duty. And the last one here that we'll talk about, so we talked about how non-attachment is not irresponsibility, how it's not laziness, and the last one is apathy. It's not that I don't care. It's not that I'm just cold. Apathy means indifference or a lack of concern, right? So where God teaches detachment, which means acting with full care and sincerity, but without selfish expectations of results, right? Apathy is like you just don't care. This is the cold person, right? So in a relationship, this person might not invest emotionally. They might not express their love or make an effort to resolve conflicts, right? Or they don't care about the other person's needs. They're certainly not going to go out of their way for the other person's needs. And whether the relationship continues or ends doesn't really matter to them, right? So they're not vested at all, right? That's not detachment, right? That's just like a very immature idea of what detachment is. It's just like I don't care, right? Whatever happens, happens. It doesn't affect me, right? So Krishna instructs Arjuna and us to act with non-attachment, but with full sincerity and devotion. Again, as if we're the controllers. I mean, imagine trying to raise kids without having that level of care and love. But at the same time, we have to be mindful of how if we get overly attached, right? Because that brings out the yuck in us. Yeah, we all know that in your relationships or your relationship with kids, or, where you try to become too much of a controller, right? So this can be tricky too. How do we care without becoming attached? And what we have to do here, we have to be invested in something, but not captivated by it, right? It requires a certain understanding of the big picture, right? And this is where dovetailing our responsibilities in service to God is the big picture, right? If we can focus on just sincerely doing our duty the best that we can and detaching from any personal motivation from the results, this is what we do. That's how we do this. So we really have to understand the big picture and how our efforts fit into it. And we have to be able to kind of meter our energy as well, like emotionally, physically, mentally, in accordance with that big picture. Okay, so like a doctor with a patient, he has to be very polite and caring. If you think of your doctor, that's what makes us like them. Like, oh, I feel like they really care about me, right? But at the same time, they have to keep a clinical distance to kind of maintain that sanity because knowing, that they can't save everyone and to keep authority, right? So a doctor has to look at the big picture, like how can I best serve? And also understand that he's not just serving one patient, he's serving many patients. And therefore he can't get too invested in just one patient. Right? So we have to kind of meter our energy in that way and understand again who we're actually serving. So a couple practical tips to do this. Again, we focus on our duty, not the outcome. We give our best effort because it's the right thing to do. That's why we're giving our best effort, not because our mind is so like zeroed in on an objective that we must achieve. Right? I know I'm breastfeeding my baby right now. And there's a whole thing. I'm a member of this mom club on Facebook that's like, formula or breast milk. And like people get so crazy over like, something happens to their supply or this or that, and they have to switch to formula. It like literally breaks people. And and I'm very grateful that I can breastfeed. But there's been some times that like, for one reason or another, I've had to use some formula. And I'm so grateful for this knowledge because I mean, I feel like I would be bummed if I had to switch entirely, but at the same time, I don't feel like it would break me. Like I feel like I try my very hardest and it's like, okay, whatever happens after that, I accept that that's just the way it is, and that's okay. We try our hardest and that's all that we can do. We have to know our limits, as people, as like these, we're part and parcel of God. We're not God. So if we're trying our hardest and this is the result, we have to accept that. And that's okay. That's our rightful place. We're not, we can't always control the result. And to think that we can, and then is just setting ourselves up for disappointment, right? So it's like we just do our part. And then we have to understand that whatever way things fall is the way that they fall and trust in something greater than ourselves, that there's a higher plan, right? That God's got our back. And to the degree that we reach out and we cultivate and develop that relationship, we know that, right? We develop that faith and we become more steady-minded and content in that. Almost like my daughter, knowing that, when she cries, I'm going to be there for her. Right? We could develop that same kind of relationship with God, and it can bring us so much regulation. My daughter cries, I run to her, and automatically she's soothed. Just from me being there. She's emotionally like regulated. God does that same thing for us if we allow, right? Okay, that was a little tangent. Another practical way that we can do this, we can practice, caring without getting overly attached, is this offering the results to God, right? Instead of working for personal gain or recognition, we work as a service. Like a musician who plays beautifully, but not for applause, but as an offering to God. And then we accept success and failure equally, understanding that they're part of Krishna's plan, like with my formula versus breast milk example, right? Whatever way it goes, I understand that ultimately she's God's child and he's taking care of her and doing it through me. I'm the instrument in that. But in that, I trust that whichever way it goes, it is part of God's plan. You know, I'm just the instrument. I can't decide, which way it needs to go. I could try my hardest, I can, as the instrument, I can, do everything that I'm capable of and try my sincere hardest, but I can't get attached to the way that, it ends up. So this is why this is another thing that's listed in this verse. This is why we don't take shelter of anything material, right? Because it can just make us too up and down, right? Like anybody here is a sports fan. I'm not a sports fan. My husband's a sports fan, but I don't even know that I'd call him that because I know sports fans who like if their team loses the next day, they're just like in a terrible mood, right? I feel like my husband has like a healthy appreciation for sports, but there's some people that like, the next day it's like, don't talk to them if their team loses, right? So they're elated when they win, they're devastated when they lose. And this just causes so many extremes. Imagine if you have many little shelters like this in life, many little things that you're just overly attached to, such that if things go one way, you're going to have a bad week, right? So again, it's okay. Appreciate sports, care about sports. I'm looking forward to watching this game. Okay. But when we put our shelter, when we tie our happiness to it, again, it's like building your home on a foundation of sand. Like it's only a matter of time before it's going to take you for a ride, right? And it just causes too many extremes. So we can't tie our sense of identity and self-worth to how many results I achieve, right? Or get fixated on it. Or we're going to be going for a wild ride and we're going to deplete our energy trying to control it, right? Because our very self-worth and sense of identity is tied to it. So we want to tie our sense of identity and our self-worth to our connection with God, right? That this is my service to God, and we'll be able to stay stable and non-attached. And it's almost like a load off, it's like a weight off your shoulders when you can say, all I have to do is show up and try my very hardest. And then, the rest is up to God. It's not even up to me. I'm not even the controller. I'm an instrument. My role is just to try my hardest. And then I have to let it go. Try this at work. Try this at work this week. The next time something's really frustrating you, just try to get really sincere on your desire, on your desire, on your motivation. Sorry, not your desire, your motivation. How sincere am I to my motivation? And am I trying the hardest that I can? And if you are, then you can check that box. That's your duty. That's it. It's so nice because we all have control over that. We don't always have control over how things go, but we have control over how we show up. And so don't look to this material energy for fulfillment. We want to dovetail it into the service of God. And in this way, we can keep ourselves from getting too attached. And this takes time. This takes time, but it is possible by practice. So the other thing Krishna talks about in this verse is being self-satisfied, right? What does this mean? Self-satisfied, constantly content. Again, this is where our identity and self-worth comes from our connection with God. When it comes from results, we'll never be constantly content, right? We'll always be in anxiety over the next thing that we want or lamentation over the way that things didn't go how we wanted, right? But when our self-worth and our identity is tied to our connection with God, that's never changing, right? That's not subject to the ups and downs of material existence. That's what's really strong. That's what's really steady, right? And sometimes we even do this in a relationship. We tie our identity and our self-worth to that person in a relationship, right? Maybe a significant other, maybe even a child, right? And when the dynamic of that relationship changes, we crumble. We have a really hard time, right? And this is because this isn't the way that we're designed. We're not designed to tie our identity and self-worth to these temporary things, right? We're designed to tie them to our connection with God. And in that, we can serve these roles. We can play these roles and we can get some level of fulfillment and happiness out of them. But to the degree that our identity and self-worth is tied into them, it's like a ticking time bomb, right? Because the nature of this material existence is temporary. So it's going to change. It's just a matter of when. And just because our identity and self-worth is tied into connection with God, if that's like just because that's like our paramour relationship, like our paramount relationship, doesn't mean that we don't show up and serve these others with the level of love and care. It actually makes the love and care that we have in our other relationships higher because it can be more selfless, because we're not showing up looking for something for ourselves from those relationships, right? It can really even kind of take away the bias. And people feel that, people feel that unconditional love, God's unconditional love channeling through you. If you think about somebody in your life or like a teacher, who has this, a lot of us have been attracted to a teacher because we feel this from them. We feel they accept and care about me no matter what. Right? That's God's love. They're truly just an instrument of God's love. And they're able to do that because they can take themselves out of the picture. Right? They're not looking to you to fulfill any of their needs emotionally, mentally, to pad their ego. A good teacher can really be detached to the point where they're an instrument. Their love is really just coming straight from God. And it's beautiful, right? We feel that. We feel how profound it is in our lives. So think if we could do this for others, by getting out of our own way. So when it comes from, let's see. Okay, like an example here of this being self-satisfied. When I talk about doing this podcast, you know, it's inevitable. Like I do care what you guys think. I do care how you guys respond. If I show up and nobody's here, I'm like, oh gosh. Or I like it when I see Suk die and my mom come 5 minutes early. I'm like, okay, if nobody else comes, at least they're here. Like it's like these things do affect you. These things do affect me. But ultimately, I remember that this is a service to God and that I'm doing it primarily to connect and to please Him. Right. So therefore, when results come, whatever they are, I feel okay. Right. It's nice. It's really, it's like it alleviates the burden of the ego. Right. You don't have to feel too proud when results come, or you don't feel down if they don't. It's just like you feel good because you're intrinsically motivated and you're feeling uplifted in that connection with God and source. And in that way, you care about the results, but it doesn't really move you, right? It doesn't make you afraid of the outcome because that God will engage you and He'll connect with you. He'll always be there. And so whatever outcome, that's going to be consistent, that's going to be steady. I think for a long time, I was afraid of doing this podcast because it'd been talked about for a long time. And I think I was afraid of doing it because I was afraid of failing or like what people would think. And I think it really took me to get to a point where I cared more about my relationship with God than that to be able to do it, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to like get up and share and be vulnerable but because that's like my tether, that's like my paramount reason, I don't know if I'm using that word right, but hopefully you guys know what I mean. It makes the other things like, okay, it's whatever the result is. I have no idea what the result will be, but whatever it is, fine. And if not enough people come that it's over, okay, God will engage me in something else that makes me feel connected to Him. So that's kind of the mindset that we want to develop. And it's a practice, it takes time. And I'm still, I find myself, up and down and, sometimes like I'll be like, oh, that didn't go all the way that I wanted to. And then I'll have to come back to the intention, it's progressive. It's not like all or nothing, there's gray areas and you're just trying to get there more and more. As long as trying to get that motivation, like when you have that scale, those scales that get teeter-totter, you just want your motivation, your selfless motivation to be the heavier one. Ultimately, you're still going to have other motivations that you're going to have to purify. But at the end of the day, we just want the heavier one, the one that has the more weight, the one that pulls us the most to be that relationship, that connection with God. So that's 420. Does anybody want to share anything about that? Okay. We can move on to 421 then. Whenever you're ready, Danny, 421.
421. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions.
Okay. So this is a pretty high standard, right? To give up all sense of proprietorship over your possessions and act only for the bare necessities of life. That's a high standard. Now we're getting to where like this consciousness is perfected of somebody who's really seriously seeking spiritual connection. So again, to remind us that this level of unselfishness, being unselfish, it's not just a state, it's a journey, right? We evolve into levels of unselfishness. 421, this verse is slightly higher than 420, than the standard that we talked about in 420. And this is, again, shows as a person is evolving. The person lives in simple living, right? And this doesn't mean that we live under a tree or without any comforts. Simple living, it's more a matter of the heart and less the body, right? So each of us has grown up in a particular place with a particular level of comfort. And so, what is the level of satisfaction of the body that we need so that we can focus on the higher purpose of life? So, it's going to be different for every person. And it's also likely going to change over time, right? Like you may think that you need a pretty high level of comfort now, but as you get more attached to spiritual life, you may say, well, maybe I don't need some of those things like I did. Like I know I used to buy a lot more clothes, like a lot of clothes all the time. Now I have like I could care less. I'm like, as long as it's comfortable and functional, it's like I'm good to go. But in my 20s, it was all about like I wanted the nicest, best, prettiest, so these things will change. And it's again, it's more of the matter of the heart than it is the body. So we can't necessarily like look at our friend who requires a higher level and judge them, right? Because we have to understand that we're all kind of on our own process, our own progress, and everybody deals with their own relationship with these things in different ways. And we all have to kind of figure it out for ourselves. But the point is that we don't want our care for the body to kind of overtake what we're actually doing with it. you know like we don't want, like, if somebody who wears glasses, the purpose of those glasses is so that they can see better, right? It's to make it's functional. But if they spend all day like washing and caring for their glasses, it's like they're kind of missing the point, right? It's like, what's the point? So with our body, like we can't give it too little or too much, right? Like with food, we can't give it too little or too much, or we'll feel bad and we won't be able to like function properly. But this limit is different for each person, right? What's too little or too much that a person becomes dysfunctional, right? So we all have to kind of figure that out for ourselves. Like, at what point is my obsession for buying clothes, kind of taking more time and energy and resources that it's distracting me from, what I actually need to do with those clothes, right? Like what the actual point is. Right? Like if I'm working and I'm making money, but all I'm buying is like nice clothes to wear to work, like what's even the point of working? And so we have to find that spot that will keep us appropriately functional. And it's a function of so many things, like emotionally, mentally, physically. And as long as we're trying to trend in the right direction, we're making progress. Right? So just being mindful of it. Being mindful of it. Krishna's saying, act in a way that your body doesn't come in the way of your service. Right? Act in a way that your body doesn't come in the way of your service. So simplicity, and that the body or mind doesn't come in the way of the soul. So if it's too comfortable or if it's too agitated, it can come in the way, right? We can be too comfortable. We can have too many opulences, too many luxuries that we become so focused on the maintenance of them, right? Or we become anxious that we're going to lose them, right? Or we may not have enough. And then it's like, it's a constant struggle of just survival, right? So we want to try to hit that middle ground where it's supporting, what we're doing. It's supporting us, but at the same time, it's not distracting us. Because again, these things are temporary. They're going to lead to temporary pleasures, and they're a ticking time bomb because they're temporary. So eventually they're going to go away, or they're going to make us need more, want more, create more anxiety, or like a protective mindset in our lives of trying to, you know, keep it all, which is also is impossible. So we have to be really mindful of what we're doing and how we're doing it, right? Another thing that's mentioned here is not being possessive, right? Possessive is a mindset. So we can have possessions. That's okay. Like a king, actually, a king needs lots of opulence because that's also how he kind of like establishes his, um, what's the word? Like superiority or like his like a king is opulent. That's how people like respect him, you know? But a king can have all the opulences in the world and not be attached to them. And in that way, if somebody who has very little but is incredibly attached to them, they could be less spiritually evolved than a king who has everything but isn't attached. Right? So it's a mindset. We can have possessions, but we can't have a possessive mentality, right? So understanding the difference between these two, we can move ahead in our lives and grow gradually. And this is again such an internal thing. Another reason we can't judge other people for what they have or don't have because it's such a mentality. You can't say, "Oh, that person has a really big beautiful house and all of these opulences. They must not be very spiritually evolved." Right? But that's not necessarily the case, right? It's really dependent on their mindset and how attached they are to those things and how much they're engaging those things in service, right? So the possessive mentality, it can apply to anything, not just possessions, right? Like relationships. We'll talk here about a parent-child relationship, right? Like a healthy possession. It's like a mother who loves her child deeply. She does everything she can to raise them, gives them guidance, care, but she understands that her child is an individual soul with their own path in life. So as the child grows, she supports them in their independence and respects their choices, even if they're different than what she had kind of envisioned. Right? So she continues to love them, but she doesn't try to control them. She has a mindset that God has entrusted these kids to my care, and I'll do my duty to parent them with love. But ultimately, they're God's child, not mine to control. And I'll guide them, but I won't force my expectations on them. Right. Side note, this is also like such a more anxiety-free way to parent. By the way, if you really believe that you're the controller, it's going to be a ride. I haven't been a parent very long, and I feel that. It's like it's so much more enjoyable even in the short term, just in the moment when you can let go of that. You could just be like, okay, I try my best and accept. Right. So as opposed to, somebody who has a possessive mindset, a parent who has a possessive mindset, they love their child, but they become so attached in an unhealthy way that they insist on deciding everything for them, right? What they should study, who they should be friends with, how they should live their life. If the child makes a different choice, they take it personally, right? Is it because they're losing control? Their love is very conditional. It's based on whether the child meets their expectations. And so they have this mindset that like they know what's best for them. They must follow what I say. If they don't, it means they don't love me and I'll be heartbroken. And it's not like this isn't like black or white. It's not like you're possessive or not possessive. There's like degrees, right? But to the degree that we have that level of possession, we're going to suffer, the relationship's going to suffer, right? And we're off course. If we're here to really connect with God, we're completely off course because we're getting so distracted in temporary things, temporary relationships, temporary possessions. So we really have to kind of change our perspective around them. So not having these desires all comes when we don't have attachments, right? If we want a calm mind, we have to really notice where our attachments are and work on them. Because to the degree that we're attached is to the degree that our mind will not be calm. And this is where these cognitive boundaries come in. You like this word cognitive boundaries? It's, we understand, like we have to see when we're starting to reach, when we're starting to get overly attached, and we have to take care, right? We have to take care of ourselves. We have to kind of pull back and understand things in their right perspectives, right? That the things in our lives are not ours, but we're the custodians. And so it's like somebody has a mansion and they don't stay there, but they have a caretaker to come take care of it. right? So the caretaker takes care of it very nicely, but they understand that this isn't mine, right? So whatever we have to take care of, but we can't crave for more, right? We have to take care of it as if we're a custodian. And this isn't just like, if you're interested in a relationship with God, oh, this is what this will like create so much space and peace in your mind that you won't want to live any other way, right? Because it allows you to love and to care without being so vested in the result, right? Without being so vested in how it's personally going to affect you, because you're getting so much personal satisfaction somewhere else that you don't have to rely on all these temporary things. And in that way, again, you can just be this channel of love, and everything in your life will improve. Your relationships with people, friends, work, whatever it is, because you can get yourself out of the way. Right? Okay. Does anybody want to share before we go to the last verse that we're going to do here?
Yeah, I'll share.
Ah, great.
I was gonna wait till the end, but I don't want to lose it. I
Great.
think it's so beautiful. It's just like ultimately having that trust and realizing you're an instrument to care for what you have. And that's all it is. Like again, I say this often in this podcast, how I had all these misconceptions, because like when you grow up and you just hear these words like detachment, you try every single idea of detachment on your own. It's like I experimented instead of getting like what it actually was. And it was like I've had those moments of apathy in relationships. I've had those moments of like extreme attachment. I've had those moments of like just like all the different types of misdetachment, like wrong types of detachment. And yeah, once you finally realize that detachment means caring, using all of your facility to do your best to care for your relationships, to care for your children, to care for your home, to care for yourself, but ultimately with the goal of like trusting that whatever happens is God's plan. It is such a beautiful like release of anxiety, and and you can really just like sit back and you can rest in the trust that God is ultimately taking care of things. And it's like a beautiful surrender. And again, it is something you have to keep cultivating. And that's why we do these practices and we come here and we read. But, I feel myself getting more and more in that mindset as I just practice more and more. And it's just like every level of it is more and more beautiful, especially around your children, because it's so hard. That attachment is so strong to our children. It's like you want to never mess up, and you have to let go and realize, yeah, you're going to mess up sometimes. And, you're going to get angry sometimes. You're going to get sad. Your kid's going to see you at your happiest, and your kid's also going to see you at your worst sometimes. But it's all part of their journey, and ultimately they're learning to trust God and work through all of these things. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. It really can transform even your relationship, like with motherhood. Like if you can approach it like that, you could experience such a higher degree of like bliss,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not worried all the time about how everything's. I mean, you're always going to have a level of worry, but it doesn't overcome you because you trust in something bigger, right?
And I noticed like me and her, like Luna and I's relationship, it's like so strong now because I don't know, it's just so strong because we want to share and like it's open and she's like a different age now, so it's just always changing because of her age. But the more I change and the more I try and bring Krishna into the center, it's like it's such a beautiful flow. And when she's like freaked out and scared and worried, I actually have some tools now to give her. Like I've learned so much from this podcast, from reading again, and I can inject like Krishna consciousness when she's scared and I can give it to her, or like when she's going through something. And it's just like such a beautiful harmony of like, wow, I'm giving Krishna to her now. And she's learning to take shelter of Krishna through her trials even. So it's just like amazing to see.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share before we move on to the last verse here? We'll move on to the last one. 22, Danny.
422. He who is satisfied with gain, which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions.
Okay. So here again, we're continuing this discussion of the theme of how to act without being entangled. That's kind of the whole theme of this section of 16 through 24. It's all how to act without being entangled. And here we're still talking about somebody who's really perfected this consciousness, right? The key is selfless dutifulness. When we understand that we're not doing this for personal pleasure, but for a higher purpose. Right? And this verse continues that theme, that one of the keys for such selfless action is that we're not fixated with the results, but that we can accept whatever comes by divine will. Right? So again, this is a mindset that we practice. So we try everything in our power, and then we accept, and we kind of understand where that boundary is of our power. Right? Like I know right now I live in Pittsburgh, and we moved here because I had a job, which now I don't work I don't work. But now it's like we have this house in Pittsburgh. We bought it during COVID, so we had like a really good interest rate on it. My husband has a job that, he has to be in a certain area to live here. So it's like, why do we live here? Like I have no idea why we live here, honestly. It's pretty random. But it's like, because all of these things, my husband's job, the house that we bought, like it just doesn't make sense to live anywhere else. It's like, okay, I just accept this is where God wants me to live right now. Like I have no idea why. And honestly, if I could have like pick, Pittsburgh would not have even probably made the list. But for whatever reason, it's where we are. And I love Pittsburgh. We have a great community. But sometimes it's just like we just accept, like, that's interesting that this, and this is aligning in a way that it just makes sense. And then we just see that as divine will. We understand our capacity and our limits to try to change it. And we say, all right, I guess that's just the way it's just falling, and it's supposed to be like that. And we accept. But this can be tricky because it's like, how do we know the difference between like premature renunciation and then accepting destiny? Right? Because endeavor plus destiny, which we know is like our past or present karma, leads to a result. Right? So the endeavor is within our control, right? Like how much we try. Destiny is beyond our knowledge and beyond our control. We don't know, we don't know how our past karma is affecting us, and we don't know God's will. Right? So we have to evaluate our endeavor and deliberate like how important is the result to me? Right? Like if a person's like a pro athlete, like a baseball player, and they try and they try and they don't make it to the team, like how much more can they do? Right? How much can be improved by their workouts and their training? Right? What's their natural skill and their body type? How important is it to them? And then based off of that, they can decide how much to proceed. Right? And the other thing is, our work is much different when we're getting a level of internal satisfaction from it. Right? It's much more sustainable for us. Like Thomas Edison, how many times did he try before he failed? I remember hearing the number. It's like huge. Or before he accomplished what he wanted to. How many times did he fail before he accomplished what he wanted to? Right? So there's something inside us that makes us feel like we should keep trying. And it is that intrinsic satisfaction. Right? So when we endeavor, we have to see how much internal versus external satisfaction we're getting. And if we're getting internal satisfaction, we can persist longer without the external results. Right? But if we're not getting that, then it may be time to move on and try something else. And in this element of this internal satisfaction in our work, it's so important because it changes our relationship with work, right? So this is another thing to consider, right? It's like, how much internal satisfaction are we getting out of what we're doing? Where are we forcing it? And we can even feel this like in our spiritual practices, right? We can feel like I can feel when I'm just forcing it, right? And we can only force it for so long. So we have to be careful. And spiritual life is so beautiful that there's so many different things that we can do to be engaged. There's kirtan, there's sastra, there's meditation, there's chanting, there's service, that we can find something that we look forward to, that really jives with us, right? We don't have to force it. We don't have to, there's a certain amount of discipline that we have to have. But at the same time, it's important that we find something that really is like conducive to our skill set and our psychology, because that's what makes it sustainable for us. So in that, we have to accept where we are, our skills, and the will of the universe. So we accept in this world that there'll always be dualities, right? When there's ups and downs, they're going to happen, and we have to stay relatively steady. So the other thing this verse says is that one of the keys for being steady is non-envy. Right? So if we have envy, it puts us in this constant comparison mentality, right? And comparison is unavoidable in this world. We're going to compare, right? The problem is not that we compare, but the problem is when we can't stop comparing, right? Again, when it like invades our mind, it just like takes over our mind, right? We get so stuck in comparing thoughts that just keep going around in our mind, tormenting us, right? So one of the ways that we can go beyond envy is the same kind of stream of thought. It's by understanding karma, right? That person is getting their karma and I'm going through my karma. And in this way, we can move ahead in our lives, right? We can be equipoised in happiness and distress, understanding that we're all on our own unique journey and we're all playing out our karma, right? And part of accepting, part of our relationship with God is accepting what that is, It's accepting that this person has their karma and I have this karma. And, our control in that way is limited. There's a point where we can try our very hardest, and then we just have to accept whatever happens because not everything is in our control, right? There's like a bound, there's like a limit. And to that, it's just being as sincere as we can to what we're doing and then accepting. Right. And ultimately we have to try to let go of the ego. Right. We know that we're part and parcel of God and that our objective is to serve the center, not be the center. Right? Like watering the plant from the root, not the branches. Right? And envy is the ego's attachment to personal desire, status, recognition. Right? And the more that we cling to this, to our ego and our self-identity, the more likely we are to feel envious. So realizing that our life is about service and contributing to the welfare of others, as opposed to competing with them, it can greatly diminish the feelings of envy. Right? Somebody asked me the other day, they asked me what ego is. They said, how do you define ego? I said, oh, it's a self-centered mentality. He said, okay, so if you're at work, he said, and they have this, and you're talking to someone, and they have this mindset that they know more than you about a certain project that you both did, and they're telling you how you didn't do it right, but they did, and theirs is better. What do you do? What do you think? Wow, this person has a big ego. And I said, first, I try to see their perspective. I consider that maybe there is something that I can learn from them, and that maybe they do have a better way of doing things. But knowing that neither one of our values is dependent on who did it better, I don't adopt that narrative, right? And if they have that narrative, then I just have compassion for them, that they feel that need to be better, right? Because I know that that's not where my worth or my value comes from, right? People tend to think that if they're the smartest or the best or the most opulent, then they're better than others. Right. And therefore, they make this the whole goal of their lives and get sucked into all of this anxiety and lamentation and ups and downs, right? To be this, to prove this. And we know it just leads to suffering, right? That's our goal is different than that, right? Our goal is bigger than that. right? When we try to work, we try to remember that we're there to make an honest living, to do our duty, to support our family for our spiritual lives, right? We don't need to get pulled into all of that. We just need to stay fixated on the right goal and not sidetracked by the petty detours, because that's what they are, right? We know that's not where our value exists. Our value is in our relationship with God. That's where our value exists, right? Tacking our value on anything else in this material existence, it's suffering. It's going to lead to suffering, even if it doesn't in the short term, right? So that's where really like our reservoir of value, that's where we need to go to get our value. And then the other things just support that. So yeah, I want to understand what you did that's maybe better, because if it is, then maybe I'll do that, because I want to try my hardest. But I don't want to try my hardest so I can be better than you. I want to try my hardest so that I can give my best to God. That's why I want to try my hardest. And in that way, you're relieved from this burden of ego and this cycle of suffering that you know you're subjected to if you live this way, right? If you're constantly worried about being the best, doing, comparing yourself to everybody else and making sure you're on top. So we talked about this actually in a class a couple times ago, the purpose of the varnas, the different roles and responsibilities that people have. The purpose is so that everybody can work together harmoniously to support them as individuals and their natural competencies and interests, and then society at large, so that it works together to function harmoniously. It's not to get caught up in the comparison game. But small-minded people get caught up in this comparison game, right? And I'm not saying that they're small-minded and I'm not. I get caught up in that too. We can all be small-minded people, but recognize when you're being a small-minded person and zoom out and understand why we're actually here and what we're doing, and don't get distracted by these petty detours. And so there's action plus accepting the divine arrangement. We talked about seeing beyond the duality through non-envy, right? And then equanimity. And this will lead to no bondage. That's what this verse says. So ultimately, I'll leave you with this. It's really about changing our perspective, right? What is the end goal here? And then aligning everything else to it, aligning our lifestyles to it, our relationships to it, the things that we think we need in life, really getting sincere about our goal so that we can get sincere about and really non-bias. In a non-biased way, we can see what actually supports that goal, right? If we can get really clear on it. And what we'll see is the more that we can do that, the more that even, the journey to the goal becomes blissful and peaceful. And the anxiety, kind of falls away. And it's fun. It's like, this isn't like a path that's like boring or sad or, we're not limited. It's actually liberating. It's just like, if you want to be like the happiest that you could be in life, these are the things that you have to practice internally. These are the things that can take you out of the jail that exists inside of your mind. Right? And you're really marching towards your eternal destiny, this relationship with God. You're making progress towards that, which is like the higher goal. So all these things that we talked about today, as we get more sincere about our goal, these things become more natural, as we become more committed to it. And things that don't support it, they naturally fall away because we have a bigger goal, something higher. Just like if you have kids and before you had kids, you were like really into going out and partying, but then you have kids and your goals change. It's like you have no reason for that anymore. All of a sudden you want to spend your time, your money, your resources on things to support your new goal, your family life. And you don't even really think about those other things. This is how spiritual life can be for us. As we get more serious about our relationship with God, with Source, these other things that just don't support that naturally fall away, because it's like, what's the point? So that's what we're trying to do here. And that is the class for today. Does anybody want to share reflection?
Yes, a lot.
Please.
Oh my God, so many beautiful, beautiful things that I can connect. The last line that you said, to be the happiest, we, this Bhagavad Gita lectures, I mean, the class that we are getting, that is another big gift. Uh, it's everyday life. You're teaching how to be free of anxiety and the bigger goal, we can go there. And then your example about being a mother, I mean, loving the child and still not being so attached, to know your limits. That was something. And Mariah also said that also I can connect with, about my daughter, how it has changed and evolved, and how we have learned more about, and about the house that you said, how you came into this house. Same feeling I have, that, we got into this house and we had no plans. And it's every day I thank God that God has put me into this house. It is so beautiful. The location is prime. And the most important thing is that I am so close to my guru and the temple. It's only a mile away. So I never thought, that I would be here, but I was just like presented. This is like a gift to me. So there are so many things in the lecture that I can connect every time the lecture comes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing. Kalpana is one that found us on YouTube. So if you donate because with those donations, I do advertisements. This Kalpana is an example of someone who found us and who is joined our community. And
did you get my donation?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And I right away I did the same thing. So your donation just paid it forward.
Good.
To for advertisements for other people.
Okay.
Thank you. KDG, please share with us.
Hi. I hope you can hear me. I'm driving. I think earlier in the class you said this awesome, like there's so many useful nuggets. And I think it was something like being involved but not captivated.
Mm.
And it was making me think how it's so easy to tip that over into captivated and kind of get lost in a reaction for me very often. And I just like this inspiration to at least try, like try to step back more towards involved or realize quicker when we're too captivated. And then it made me think, I think you said something else about distractions, and that's another challenge that I feel like it's just useful to hear and talk about and like realize a little bit more how they can be so captivating, I suppose. And then maybe like a month ago, I was thinking like, this is called the Gita in action. And I'm like, it's so great during class and when I do my sadhana and some of the time, and then some of the time it's just not, I just feel so blessed to be motivated by this idea to like more and more like put it in action. So it was a kind of a funny thing to like think in my mind so distinctly, like, wait a minute, it's called the Gita in action, like, hello, so I think, just connecting those together, this class was really, really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. The Gita, it's not like some esoteric text that it's like can't relate to us at all. No, it's timeless and it's universal. And the more that we really dig into it, the more we see how much it can apply to our lives and how much it can help us to grow and evolve on this path. So yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Danny, please share with us.
Thank you, Radha. Also, congratulations on your daughter. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to comment on we have to be interested in something, not captivated. That really stood out. I wrote it down immediately. I have to remember that. As far as I do see this as really, really important as far as motherhood goes. it's so much better when you're less anxious in that relationship with your child. It's so hard as a mom, at any stage of their lives. You have a baby. My daughter last year moved out of our house, so we're empty nesters, which is, I felt like I did a better job of being detached when she was home. Now she's out, even though she's 27. I'm worried about her all the time, like she's a child. Um, and I get kind of jealous of my husband because he's much better at being supportive, giving her what she needs without the worrisome clinging and detachment. So this is a huge part of my journey right now, and it's very helpful to remember that although my relationship is with her, she's not mine. And what I am really trying to remember is it's more about my relationship with Krishna than my relationship with her. Like I always have to remember to see Krishna in it first. It's not just me and her. Krishna is always there. So I really appreciate this teaching, and thank you very much for your service. I'm so glad that I can join on Thursdays. On Mondays, I have to leave for work early, but I do listen to the other recordings, and I was really missing you. So this is very nice to see your face.
Oh,
Thank you.
so good. Thank you. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we don't feel the things. Like I was watching Modern Family last night, and the three kids, it was like the last episode, the three kids are moving out. And I started crying. And I looked over at my husband. I'm like, "You're not crying about this? These kids are moving out. This is the saddest thing." He's like, "What is wrong with you?" So it's like, yeah, it's real. We feel these things, but just like you guys said, we can't let ourselves be overcome. Like, feel it, understand it for what it is, and then try to redirect our energy, because it's the only thing that's really, that relationship with God is the only thing that's enduring and sustaining and can really hold all of that for us. Nothing else can in this material world. So thank you all. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you all on Monday.
Thank you so much, Radha. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Because
you.
I know
Thank
we were
you.
selfish moms, and you're giving your time.
It's a blessing. It makes me a better mom. I know it does. So thank you all.
Thank you.